So, hello and welcome to the second presentation of today's Android Budapest meetup. After learning about the overall concept behind accessibility, let's dive into one tricky part of it, text scaling. Today, I'm going to show you how you can be that one tiny little annoying dev within your team that can break every design your designer ever made. So in order to do that, first we will brush up on what the hell exactly text scaling is and what kind of evil users deign to use it. Second, we will look at some real-world apps that will show us the most common problems that text scaling can cause. And third, we will go over the methods with which you can avoid these problems in the future. So, just to reassure everyone here, I did not start out as a developer whose hobby is just checking Android apps whether they handle text scaling for fun. It all started with a somewhat long and boring workday where I may have not had a lot to do. That is somewhat dangerous in this sector, as we do tend to make more work for ourselves if we are bored. So basically that happened because I started to flip through the apps that we have at our company, and for whatever reason, I chose to change the font scaling settings and the display size element settings on our test Android phone. Now, I thought that I have felt secondary shame before, but boy, was I wrong. So almost every one of our apps was broken in some way because of text scaling, and that not really made me happy. At that point, I started to think about that either we are very bad at what we are doing, or this might be a common problem that maybe a lot of developers struggle with or just, well, met once in their lifetime. So if you have ever heard about accessibility before, and of course you have because everyone was paying attention to the previous presentation, right? Then you may have heard about WCAG or WCAG, that stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The reason we are talking about web content in an Android meetup is very simple. If you ever get a very nice letter from the government office related to accessibility issues, then I have to tell you that the unfortunate thing will happen. You will get in that letter a list of failures that are categorized under WCAG. As Suji said, you don't have to really worry, because first they will just tell you, okay, we found these problems. When is the next time that maybe you could promise us that by that deadline you will fix them? So they are not nasty paper, they try to help, but of course when you get a letter like that, you may feel a little conscious about your next moves. So what does WCAG actually say about text scaling? It says that, dear developers, please make sure that within your application, text can be made larger without any excessive technology. That means if you have been thinking that if our users want to be able to read these texts, it's just say to them that just use the magnifier or just use screen reader, then actually you are failing this criterion. So the responsibility of providing a good enough scaling technology is the responsibility of the Android operation system. And fortunately for us, it gives us a way in which we can set font scaling within the Android settings app. But you are responsible for creating content that is scalable within your app itself. Okay, now that we have resigned ourselves for supporting text scaling, what does WCAG actually say? What percentage of text scaling do we have to support? Maybe you have heard from somewhere that it's 150% or 200%, but those are wrong. Maybe you heard from somewhere that it's 200% or to the sizing capabilities of the platform. And if you say that, I would say you are very close. But the fourth one is the longest, so it's going to be the correct one, of course. But why is it correct? It's correct because WCAG actually gives us some exceptions that we can say we do not want to support text scaling. For example, if you think about headings, it says that headings usually are just large enough. You don't have to make them bigger because then they will take up the whole screen. Or if you have images with text on them and they are, packed together, generated together, fortunately, again, you don't have to provide alternative images just because your text scaling changes. Okay, so maybe you are already thinking that I will just use material. Material will solve everything, right? And you would be partially right. Because material components, if used correctly, do support text scaling. For example, within material components that have text in them, text and line height scales with the text font scale, but paddings and additional spacing do not scale, they stay at the default size. And for material components that do not have text in them, they won't be affected at all. It is usually a very good practice via development and the design phase to check your screens in bigger sizes as well, because most of the times people use font scaling for making screens less overwhelming. Just let's stop for a minute. Think about what kind of users actually use your apps. We heard, Suji, that a lot of people use it, not just disabled people, but people with occasional impairments, like when you are standing on the bus and you have to hold on to the bus because otherwise you will just fall off, because BKK does that. But if you think about it, people who are tired, they are often tired, they will make font scaling bigger because it's easier to read the news on the phone when you are tired and the text is big. Or if you think about children use phones now. When children are learning to read, it is easier for them to read a bigger text when it has big fonts. Just think about how your first grade reading books look like. They had very big fonts. Or if you think about people who are actually working, and they work in fields where it is hard for them to navigate an app. For example, in construction and transportation, it just gets more important for us to consider them. Okay, so I said that it was very important or a good practice to check your screens during design phase. So just let's look at some apps in the next 5 slips from real life, whether they follow this good practice or not. So the first app I'm going to show you is Drops. It's a language app. And as you can see, we are looking at 100% font scale and 150% font scale. And, well, Drops made an oopsie. These are the same picture. That means Drops disable text scaling. Okay, next we have the Tesco app. I hope no one is here from Tesco. If yes, then sorry, guys. So now if you look at the pictures, actually you can see that the buttons and the bottom navigation bar are working correctly, so good. But if you look at the content unfortunately do not scale. I would give a 5 out of 7 for effort. Now, here we have a real piece of art. This is the Motorola system app, and more precisely, this is the font size selection page. Now, as you can see, the content scales. Very good. As you can see, the content in the card is not clipped. You can see it, but I can tell you it has scrolling within it, so good. But at the bottom, the selection row, well, might have not been the best idea ever made. And for this, I want to point out that if you support multiple languages in your app, then please check your screens in all of the languages, because this might happen, and Hungarian is not even the worst in this case. Have you seen German? So yeah, maybe they should have picked another layout for this. Yeah. Next, we have the One app, which is a little, well, too fixed on heights if you look at this by data card. It is very good that my phone can only support 150% font scaling, because otherwise I might not be able to buy more data when I need it. Finally, I brought you another language app, Duolingo, because why not? Now, I want to say that actually Duolingo does a really good job at text scaling, because most of the language learning screens, they scale beautifully. This was actually the only screen I could find where some of the content was disabled. So I wanted to show you that even a good app that mostly does a good job can make some mistakes, so it's not perfect. Okay, now that we have looked at real apps, let's go over the common issues again, but now let's talk about how we can avoid them in the future. Okay, so as a point, before all points, let me just point out that when you are creating your most beautiful and elegant UI composables, actually there is a way to check them by development. We also heard it from Suji. You can use the font scale argument for previews, and usually I create a custom annotation with a small enough width and at least 5 or 6 font scale level. So, and I'm using it in a way that I assign it to every composable I make. And that way I can always recheck it while developing that, okay, it still looks good. It still looks good. Of course, you have to provide good enough test data for that. So it wouldn't be enough to just say test address here, because you wouldn't say the 3 or more lines. Okay. Our first point is fixed heights. It is very easy to, when you look at a Figma or other technology design, you see fixed heights and widths on the elements. And it is very, very easy to just copy those fixed values from the design, because actually you can generate or you can copy the whole composables now from Figma. And if you do not review them, these little tiny height modifiers will creep into your code. And then, of course, they will blow up in your faces when you reset the font scaling. So this looks easy, right? So not setting the height just solves this, right? What could go wrong? Oh, wait, I have a good idea. How about we use longer text for this very nice list item? Let's say that in Figma previously this was not mentioned, nobody thought of this, and because it wasn't mentioned and we cannot see another variant for this Figma element, we decide that, okay, let's just assume that this item can grow to its heart's content. What happens? Here comes our client. Client says, no, we do not want this to be different. We want them to be the same height, or at most almost the same height. It's a little inconvenient at that point, but my tip for this, at this point, you should ask the designer, okay, what should we do? And the designer should clarify it. In our case, our designer said, okay, let's just set the max lines to be 3, and it's going to solve everything, right? Again, what could go wrong? We already know that text scaling could go wrong, and it will go wrong. When you set the max lines to be 3 and use ellipsized with it, basically we fail the VCAG constraint we have, because VCAG at that point will say, okay, but now you have to make sure that your user somehow can read the whole content. And with this, we arrive at our second point. Usually, I see two options here with what we could solve this ellipsizing problem. Either we say we add some kind of expanding option to our element, or we say that we are going to use a pop-up, toast, snack bar. So let's just stick with pop-up, yes? Fortunately for us, our designer was of the same thought and said that maybe it would be better, because our client said that the elements should be basically the same height, that, okay, we will show it in a pop-up. Now, we will look at some code here. Next to the design, you can see that we have code lines, and some of them have very nice markers next to them, blue and red ones. The blue ones are responsible for code that checks whether our item should be openable or not. The red markers sign that the code that are related to the height of our elements and the offset of our pop-up. Because if you look at the design, we see that the item and the pop-up is somewhat aligned, with a little offset. So we can show our users that this pop-up belongs to or relates to that element. So let's start with the blue ones, because they are the easier ones. We say that we only want to make this element long clickable. I'm using long click here because we usually use on click for something else, some other feature. So these elements should be only long clickable if their text layout result overflows its height. Fortunately for us, if we can get a text layout result from somewhere, we can use the did overflow height and assign it to the long click. And clicking is like just that. Okay, next to the red ones, we say that we said that we want our pop-up to be somewhat offset from our element. So maybe it would be good to use the height of the element. And we can get that height from the onSize chain modifier of our whole item card. Now we have this height. We still need to get our text layout result from somewhere and use this height. I'm holding it in my hand so we don't forget it. Okay, where can we get our text layout result? Fortunately for us, again, the text composable has a variant that has a non-text layout callback, so we can just remember it, and we have our text layout result. Nice. Now we only have to use this height. I've been keeping it safe. We can set it in the pop-ups offset argument, and it's just a vertical offset, so we can set the value there. Don't worry, both are in pixels. Okay, so basically we have a working pop-up. We can show our users the content. Nice. Our third point is reflowing the layout. It's somewhat similar to what Suji said. The difference is I'm just talking about it in a text scaling related way. It might sound a little like magic, but actually I have a real world story for you about this. So we were working on a transportation app to one of our clients, and our designer created a design that looked like structurally to the design on the left side. Maybe some of you can at first blink point out what the problem is. I could too, I swear. But after our users started using the app, we got the following non-greatly descriptive bug ticket. The texts are falling apart. Please fix them as soon as possible. At that point, we were a little confused. So as all good developers would do, we asked for a screenshot. What we received almost looked like the middle picture. It was way worse, because as it turned out, our client forgot to mention that all of the workers were using the phone with font scaling and display element sizes kept to the maximum level. Now, I know that non-functional requirement is sometimes it's very hard to grasp, because here comes our client and says, we want the app to work and look good. But it turned out that our actual users use the app in a way that nobody thought to mention, because for them it was easier to use the app with big fonts and big elements because they were driving. And they sometimes wore gloves that made the navigation harder for them. Also, so these guys, they are this tall and this wide, and they have like 3 times my fingers. For them, a little close button is like killing the whole point. Yeah, so when I saw the middle picture, the worst version of it, I also saw that whatever I would do with this row layout, it just won't work. So I suggested to our designer that after a certain font scaling and display element size, we should just restructure a whole screen. We should move from a horizontal one to a vertical one, from row to column. after we change this little layout, after we did this little layout change, our user said that, okay, now we can read everything. Nice. And also we can understand the hierarchy of the screen better. It's more clearer for us. It's not overwhelming at all. This is all nice and good, but what happens when, after reflowing the layout and letting the content scale to its hard content, a screen just gets too big? With this, we arrive at our 4 points, where I have to say that basically, for every screen, it's a pro gamer move just to add scrolling by default. You know, it's a no-brainer. But usually, I found it very hard to explain this point to management, because on the iOS side, the iOS guys have finite types of models and devices that they have to support. So what do they do? They select the still supported smallest device, and they check on this device whether the screen fits on or not. If it fits, they say, we don't need scrolling. It's good. Why is it a problem? For me, it's a problem because our designer mostly creates our designs iOS first. So if the iOS guys say, we are covered, she says, cool. I say, no. Because on the Android side, we have so many devices, so many models, we cannot even count. Also, we have screen splitting, where you can, split your screen into 2 apps. So while you were checking with the smallest device you could maybe found, whether the screen fits or not, if you split the screen into 2, it's not gonna fit. Also, we cannot even use orientation fixation anymore because of Android 16, so just forget it, just start scrolling everywhere by default. Okay, last but not least, please use responsive font sizes, guys. If you are using SP, you are covered, you are doing the work of God. Keep doing it. Now, if you ever run into a problem in the future with text scaling, and you realize that the design never considered that your users will use font scaling, and it turns out that even your client doesn't really want to pay for any accessibility features, that actually happens, unfortunately, then you might hear the following question. Can't you just disable text scaling for the whole app? Now, as an Android developer, I hope that you all will say no. But I also know that you are Android developers who are working for companies or clients, and they are paying you. So you might not have a choice, yes? If this is the only chance that you can save yourself from starving to death, then you might do something like the non-scaled SP on the sleep, the non-scaled SP extension on the sleep. Or you could use the onConfiguration change callback, and there you could just set the font scale back to the default one. Just please don't forget that if you do this, maybe next time you will get on my shame list. So this was my presentation on tech scaling. Thank you for hearing me out and coming. I was Klaudia Kozaróczy, and hopefully see you next time.